women tend to bring different perspectives, different views, different ways of looking at things, which can actually be very beneficial for helping us solve lots of complex issues and problems. And the research has been showing that women actually in sales do have actually a higher win rate on average than men.
Welcome back to the Talking Sales series. John Smybert with Sue Barrett. G'day, Sue. How are you doing?
Well, John, thanks for having me.
And you, Sue. A long time ago, you and I had a discussion about women in sales and so on. I'd really like to explore the subject of why women are great for sales and the bottom line, which is one of your headlines. Tell me what you think. You're a pioneer in the world of getting more and more women into sales and sales leadership roles. Why is it important, and what do we do about it?
Well, besides us being 51% of the population, it probably would make some sense to have more women present. Just for that
in the customer, the other thing in customer environment now, there's more and more women in a buying role.
Absolutely. So what we've got to really look at here is that women, and this is a general statement, women tend to bring different perspectives, different views, different ways of looking at things, which can actually be very beneficial for helping us solve lots of complex issues and problems. And the research has been showing that women actually in sales do have actually a higher win rate on average than men, which is consistent with the fact that women's higher win rate is around some key competencies that they bring in terms of top sales performance. So some of these competencies that we're talking about that women in general tend to have is that they have skills and capabilities around really listening beyond the obvious product.
So you're saying better IQ or
EQ?
EQ.
Well, actually, there's an expression I'd like to introduce into the conversation called emotional literacy. EQ is part of emotional literacy. EQ is more of a cognitive function, which you do need, but emotional literacy is the ability to not only understand and be aware of yourself, but to understand and be aware of other people. And there's things like theory of mind, where it's where you can sort of understand what the other person may be thinking. You don't have to actually agree with what they're thinking or saying, but you have an ability to actually see it from their perspective. And we're finding that women tend to be able to do this more easily than men. They tend to have an ability to listen beyond the obvious needs. So they not only listen to what's being said, they listen to meaning, they listen to what's not being said, and then inquire further about that. And so they tend to unpack and understand the context and the content of what's actually going on. Women, not all women, but a lot of women are very good project managers just because of our lives, because of all the things we've got to manage and sort and organise. And a lot of women in sales roles are also very good at orchestrating the internal resources, and they're good at building the relationships internally with their business to then orchestrate those resources to get them to clients' businesses, whatever those resources may be. So in a sense, they're acting as project managers in some ways. They're also aligning the customer's objectives with the business's objectives. So what they're doing is they're working out how to actually create harmony. How we get along, how are we going to make this work? They don't want to be taken advantage of, and equally too, they don't want the customer to be taken advantage of. They want to create sort of a, something where there's a shared vision and commitment, and we work together. Now, it doesn't. Men of course could do that, but women just seem to have an ability to, in these worlds, in these roles, to do this, whether it's innately or trained, but they're doing it.
Why do you think women have a greater ability to be that way?
I think if we look at nature and we look at kind of the origins of humans, they actually say that women actually have much better peripheral vision than men. And the reason that apparently comes from back in, prehistoric days when we're foraging and got little babies around us while the blokes are out hunting. Um, we've got to not only forage and get the food, we also had to make sure that our babies weren't wandering off too far and there wasn't danger. So we had an ability to be able to kind of in our brains see all sorts of things and moving parts and just make sure that, okay, pull that thing back here and watch out for that over there. There's a lot of that kind of stuff that happens. So
keep harmony in the family and
yeah, and make sure that everyone's doing their thing and not dashing off. There's this kind of innate kind of ability, and they do find that teenage boys don't have very good peripheral vision. And if you think genetically and biologically, when you're out hunting, you have to have very good, pinpoint accuracy going after something. So that's why when you've got boys out on bicycles or skateboards or things like that, you've got to be careful of them because often their peripheral vision isn't as good as a young girl's peripheral vision. It's just part of our makeup. So whether that's playing a part in this, I can't say for sure, but biologically it could actually be serving women better because they're actually reading a whole lot more things and taking into account a lot of variables that they have to coordinate and manage. I liken I think we can learn both, well from both genders. I mean, if you think about the yin and yang of selling, the yin is the feminine, the yang is the masculine. So let's take men and women out of it. The yang is that kind of proactive, on the front foot, go out there, create opportunity, that dynamic sort of, that prospecting energy, that building. And we all need to learn that. And in fact, women do need to be more assertive in that space as well. That's something that we can actually learn a lot from men, but not in an aggressive way. Okay, so this is where the yin comes in. That's that sensitivity, being able to deal with ambiguity, being able to understand that complexity. And in the 21st century world, it is more complex, and there's many moving parts. So I think with the yin, where we're really looking at how we can actually listen, understand, and integrate the masculine and the feminine into these sales roles, then men and women will both benefit a lot more from the honouring and respecting both of these capacities. And I'm being obviously very it's basic, but the yin capacities are things like listening, questioning, resolving problems, collaborating, empathy, understanding. Those need to be encouraged as really great virtues for all salespeople and all leaders and people in general, as well as that proactive, get out on the front foot and go for it kind of stuff. So how do we create harmony with all of those things?
So you're saying 51% of the population are female, and you're saying if organisations aren't consciously ensuring they have a balance in their teams, sales teams and business teams totally, then they're ignoring all of this, and their business is going to suffer as a result.
Well, it can suffer because if you're not paying attention to sort of these less obvious things, if you're not actually doing the investigation properly, if you're not orchestrating internal resources, if your organisation keeps rewarding that kind of the sales individual superstar who's this, you're in the dark ages, seriously, because selling is a team sport now, and it's this collaborative approach, and this is where I think women can play a big part, where we can actually ensure that we work together to collaborate on this outcome, and we organise ourselves, and we do this and we do that. And it doesn't mean there aren't women out there who are the individual sales superstar model either. They are, but they're not common. This more collaborative approach to working together, making sure that we actually, create space for ambiguity rather than this pin-eyed focused on quarterly results all the time, because that doesn't allow for the fluidity that actually happens in the ambiguities that occur in sales. It just makes it a fear-based culture. Whereas I think when you work together dynamically and you honour and respect and listen to each other, you actually do get much further, much faster, and clients love it.
Okay, so bottom line is it really does pay to have a balance between male and female in your sales teams and your business teams.
Yeah, well, it pays to have a balance, but it also pays to honour all the qualities that I've just been mentioning and get both genders to actually imbibe all of that. So,
and they can learn from each other. So men
yeah,
can learn from women, and women can learn from men, and together they go forward to create more value for their clients.
yeah, but the weighting has been too far. You know, look at what I've got. I'm here. That kind of beat my chest kind of scenario. We've got a long way to go to shift it to a more harmonious listening to, helping, and
Well, we
working
talked about
collaboratively together.
we talked about culture earlier on, and really that's part of the culture we need to build, the values and standards we need to establish in our organisations to enable that to harmoniously happen, right?
Yeah, so the feminine qualities that I've been mentioning, they need to be honoured and respected and cultivated and not just seen as woman's work.
Yeah.
Because this is what great leaders, regardless of gender, and great salespeople, regardless of gender, have cultivated these things. And so that kind of, warrior, individual sales superstar, they don't make for good sales teams anymore.
No, I agree. So yeah, and at the same time, in that sort of environment, female characteristics tend to be belittled, and therefore, as you say, they're not honoured, and therefore.
No. But if they were, and they were raised up and actually brought forward, and people were taught, and this then would actually help with this emotional literacy. So it comes all the way back. If you teach people how to be self and other aware, how to communicate and ask good questions and listen and respect and create and respect silence, respect someone speaking, create that space and honour it, you actually find that people will, it sounds like it goes slower, but it actually speeds everything up from a business development perspective. It's kind of a paradox. But when people start doing that, they find really good things happen.
Sue, thank you very much for that conversation. I really have, over the recent years, I've had to change a lot myself because I was brought up in pretty much a whole male sales environment. And it's just astounded me what I've seen in some organisations where they've got that balance right, where they do honour, the female characteristics coming into the team and seeing that they can all work together and learn from each other and get a balanced approach to delivering value to their clients and so on. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts on that, and hopefully for all those sales leaders, particularly out there, but sales teams, I hope you got value out of that. It's worth listening to what Sue's got to say, seeing what you can do to deploy it in your own organisation if you're not quite there yet. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you, John.
This episode of Talking Sales is sponsored by the authors of the new page-turning sales novel, The Wentworth Prospect. In the words of one reviewer, it's B2B sales mastery delivered in an ingenious, engaging, and hugely entertaining way. Get it now at your favourite book retailer.